I just finished Dark Souls 2, and despite all the hate towards it, I kind of enjoyed it. Well, you may have played Elden Ring, Dark Souls 3, Dark Souls 1, Bloodborne, I don't know, from software games. Or not, even. And you may know Dark Souls 2 as the worst game of the series. And to be honest, I don't really disagree with that or anything. Don't get me wrong. I'm not gonna defend Dark Souls 2 here, but I just wanna talk about the stuff that I enjoyed and the stuff that I really didn't enjoy while playing the game, because I played and finished the Dark Souls 2 game. Well, before we start, I wanna mention, so far, I only played Dark Souls 1 and just finished Dark Souls 2, so I have no idea about Elden Ring, Dark Souls 3, or Bloodborne or Sekiro in that matter. So I just seen them briefly, but I haven't played them even a single second. So bear that in mind. So I will be mainly talking about Dark Souls 2 and mentioning Dark Souls 1 from time to time. The first thing that caught my attention in Dark Souls 2 was that it begins differently than Dark Souls 1. Because in Dark Souls 2, it's more like you're going out for a journey, whereas in Dark Souls 1, you were a prisoner. So you try to get out of there and try to find your way, try to find what you will be doing in this game. At least that's what I was understanding from the first game when I was playing it for the first time. But in Dark Souls 2, it's more like, okay, now I'm going for a journey, I met with these old ladies and stuff, and then the story proceeds, and it's more like you're trying to achieve something in Dark Souls 2, whereas in Dark Souls 1, you were just trying to basically live, I would say. Like I said, this is just what I was getting. Of course, I tried my best to understand the lore and what's going on in the story as well, but this is just like in means of like what's going on in the world while playing Dark Souls series, because I watched the lore videos after finishing the games, so I didn't know fully about what's going on. Of course, you can talk with NPCs and read stuff, of course, but like I said, that was what I was getting. In Dark Souls 1, it was more like I'm trying to survive, I've just got out of the jail and stuff like that, whereas in Dark Souls 2, it was more of like a journey that I'm taking. It's like an adventure. So with that in mind, in every area I went to, I approached it more like another adventure, I would say. Like, do I want to go here now or not? Whereas in Dark Souls 1, I was more like trying to understand where to go, what should I do next. Because in Dark Souls 1, in the beginning of the game, if I'm not mistaken, you can go to 2 to 3 places or something, I don't know, and it branches from there. But in Dark Souls 2, like I said, if I remember correctly, you have more options to where you want to go first, and the branches are spreading faster, if that makes sense. So that's that. Which one do I like better? To be honest, in Dark Souls 1, I had many areas that led to bigger areas, but in Dark Souls 2, there are just, in my opinion, a lot of areas, but a lot of small areas that don't branch that much, if that makes sense. Like I said, the branches are spreading faster, you have more options to where you want to go next in an area, but in terms of that area's length and size, it's not as big as in Dark Souls 1, if I'm not mistaken. But I think the most prominent thing in Dark Souls 2 are the bosses, or more like the boss count. Because in Dark Souls 2, there are 42 bosses with DLCs, and in the Scholar of the First Sin, which is the version I played, 33 bosses. And it was 22 in Dark Souls 1, which is a big leap in my opinion. And more importantly, and this is what I actually meant by you see a lot of little places, smaller places, because you get to fight a lot of bosses. Like there are 42 bosses and you fight with bosses often in this game. Very often than in Dark Souls 1. Which makes sense because in Dark Souls 1 the areas were bigger, if I'm not mistaken, like I said, and there are less bosses. So it makes sense that you don't get to fight with bosses every now and then. But in Dark Souls 2, you get into an area, you travel a bit, fight with little minions and stuff, and then you get to the boss. And then that continues like that. So I like that there are more bosses, but the problem I have with bosses in Dark Souls 2, which this was also a thing in Dark Souls 1, but I didn't really felt that much in Dark Souls 1, the negative of this, which is that the bosses are not that complicated at all. Like, most of them you don't really have many problems with, you pass them relatively quickly, which is, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. Because the movesets of the bosses and sometimes the bosses being reused, Dragon Riders. Like, I think there are, how much? I think there are like 4 of them. First you fight them, and then you fight another one, and then you fight 2 of them at the same time, and then you fight one of them with as a normal enemy, if I'm not mistaken. So that makes 4 or 5 times you see these guys. And to be honest, they are really not hard at all. Like, Dragon Riders have 4 moves or something. One of them is like a pierce attack, just like that, and people cheese that a lot. I saw videos. One of them is like slamming like this, if I'm not mistaken. One is like a slash attack, and then another, and sometimes another. But like, that's it. Like, one of the bosses that I really liked was the Lost Sinner, which is one of the big bosses, and that fight was actually quite interesting. There are things that you can do before the fight that will ease up your fight, but generally the fight is really fun. I don't want to really spoil anything if you want to play the game. I really liked the aspect that you see in the first second of the fight. I really like that, and I'm not talking about the cinematic. That was also cool, and I've watched some Vachivida videos, so that's pretty interesting. But I'm talking about the stuff about the candles, if that makes sense. I think that's really cool. As a fight, I think that's also very cool. Design-wise, I think it's really, really interesting. And yeah, I really like that boss fight. And I wanted to fight this boss 2 times because of the Old Witch Soul, which you get a weapon from. And that was really interesting, but I was really struggling. Like, in that one, I think I tried like 40 times or something, if I'm not, making that number up. It was really hard. I even used summons for the first time in my, well, no, not in whole Dark Souls experience, but in means of summons, like not an NPC, but a helper NPC, if that makes sense. Like, I of course summoned NPCs for their quest lines in Dark Souls 1, and in this game as well I try to, at least, because I will get to that too, because NPCs are really underwhelming in this game, if that makes sense. But yeah, I used like this shield guy and this sword guy to defeat the second version of this boss, which is the New Game Plus version, which I also want to talk about. The Bon aesthetic, I think it was called like that, is really cool. I, to be honest, like that feature. Like, not being have to starting a New Game Plus, but experiencing the New Game Plus version of the bosses. I think it's really cool. I saw people exploiting that and gaining a lot of souls early on because of that. But, it's definitely your choice. I think when you're a full build and before killing the last boss, trying your luck with New Game Plus versions of the boss is a fun thing. But I did that at the end of the game, so I think that makes sense. That I didn't have that problem the people had with that, using it like that, I mean. So, if we talk about the NPCs, to be honest, the NPCs, I really didn't care about any of them. Like, I'm sorry, I really didn't. Like, there are some NPCs, and the number goes up as you further delve into your journey. Like, they meet up in the Majula, which is like the main lobby of the game. and you can talk to them, of course. I guess they have some quest lines, but you don't really get much from them or learn much from them. Like I I even already forgot some of the NPCs, to be honest. I really didn't care about them. Some of them I didn't really follow through. Some of them didn't even talk to me, so I didn't do anything to, get them to talk, like learn their story and stuff, because I really didn't cared enough to do all that. Basically, I didn't even felt the need to look what's up with them in the YouTube or Reddit. And I think that tells something, because in Dark Souls 1 I really cared about at least some of the NPCs, especially Solaire, of course. I think it's the best NPC of all time. I really like Solaire, goddammit. I'm so sorry, Solaire. Oh my god. Why this video took a very sad fucking tone. Anyway, I, by the way, joined the Sun Covenant in the Dark Souls 2 as a way to salute Solaire, basically. So yeah. For the most time, I played with the Ultra Great Sword. At the time, I had a second one, and I made one of them lightning and one of them dark, and use them together to defeat enemies and stuff, which was really cool. I don't know if this was a feature in Dark Souls 1 as well, but the movesets of the weapons change when you have the same weapon in both of your hands, and you long press triangle, because I was using my PS4 controller while playing, and you get the special version of that weapon's moveset. In Ultra Great Sword, it makes you slash them with both of them, and you with both of them, basically. Yeah, that's really cool. I really like that. One problem I had was I can't really, in these Souls games, use the jump attack. I think there was jump attack in Dark Souls 1 as well. I'm not really sure. But I can't really, achieve that move for some reason. I do exactly what it said, but like it works sometimes, but most of the time it doesn't work, or I can't get it to work. So that's a complaint I have, but it's more or less about me or with my controller. I don't know. Other than that, playing with Ultra Greatsword was really fun. I get it early on, at a time that I wasn't supposed to be at a place, so I was trying to rush and dodge, but it was really hard because I was very, very under level to get the first Ultra Great Sword from that chest. So it was really hard. I had many hours of attempts. I think I tried for 2 or 4 hours, if I'm not mistaken, which is a lot, but my life got very good once I got the Ultra Great Sword. I also leveled myself up with bosses and stuff, tried to farm a little bit to actually wield the sword. But after that, the life was really fun. I love Great Swords and Dark Souls series. I actually played the first game with a Great Sword as well. I really like them. I think Great Swords are awesome. I more or less prefer, having a heavy attack on an enemy than stab them 100 times or use a bow or magic. I see that magic is very cool as well, by the way. Throughout, especially Dark Souls 2, I come across a lot of magic spells or pyromancy spells, doesn't matter. And they look really fun, to be honest. And I will be using them probably in Elden Ring, because they say in Elden Ring, like, Elden Ring is basically the top level, and they say magic is awesome in Elden Ring as well. So, or I don't know, maybe I get back to these games, the first two, or when I finish the third game as well. I don't know, but I most likely will be playing Elden Ring a lot of times, because people say you don't get enough of Elden Ring unless you beat it like 30 times or something. I don't know. So I will be in one of those playthroughs. I will be playing with magic. That's my plan. But in means of returning to the games, well, to be honest, Dark Souls 2 is much better when it comes to bonfires. And remember, I'm comparing it to Dark Souls 1, because in both means of teleporting, you get to teleport way earlier, if I'm not mistaken, or even at the first level. I can't remember that clearly. But also in means of how many bonfires you get and how far away the bonfires are from the bosses. I think it's way better than Dark Souls 1 in that mean. And also you get little, pictures of the bonfire, which is also good because in Dark Souls 1, it was really hard for me to understand which bonfire was where, basically. That may be on me, but you get what I mean. It was a way comfortable experience for me, which is good because you die a lot in these games and you go to many places in this game. So yeah, that's really nice. I also see that people complaining about these life gems, if I'm not mistaken, like the stones that you break and get health from. Like they say they make the game very easier and stuff. I saw those concerns and stuff. And in my experience, to be honest, they didn't really affected my playthrough that much. Because yes, I get the sentiment of like you can basically have infinite numbers of them, which is true. You can buy infinite numbers of them, but at the end of the day, they bosses don't really let you use them that frequently or easily. So like and there are also other items that you can use to heal up and stuff in the game. A lot of items, to be honest, which I didn't really realize. I think there were some in the first game as well, but I generally use my Estus Flask and it generally is enough for me, and which is way better than the other sources of healing up in my experience, because Estus Flasks gives you way more health and it fills up way quicker, whereas in the other types of healing up, they generally take more time, and some of them even take more time to even use. Life gems are not like that. You can even move while using life gems, which is a very big plus in my opinion. But in the end of the day, they don't really matter if you can't really read the boss well, because even if you have an infinite amount of health, you will lose if you can't really read the boss's moves, which in my opinion in Dark Souls 2 is not really that complicated to do. So yeah, there were some bosses that I really struggled, but there are also a lot of bosses that are really easy and some that are really not fun at all. But yeah, I liked some of the things that Dark Souls 2 did for the first time. Some of them I didn't. But at the end of the day, I think it was a nice adventure. I couldn't actually beat all the bosses, but the reason behind that isn't that I gave up on the bosses that I found, but more like locating stuff in this game is really hard. Like that's one of the biggest problems I had with the game, because I had to constantly look up stuff, like how to go there, how to do this, how to do that. Of course, I used Wiki a lot in Dark Souls 1 as well, but the problem I have here is that I don't find the next branch that easily. And what I mean by that is, in Dark Souls 1, when I find myself in a place, I always found my way back to where I supposed to go. If I entered the place A and then to place B, I find myself to place C eventually. But in Dark Souls 2, I often didn't see, didn't notice, or didn't have the proper item or the proper enemy defeated to proceed, which is a little problematic, because I had a lot of times that I didn't know where else I could go. Because like I said, there are a lot of bonfires that I can go and, look around. But the problem is, if I don't see where I should go, if I can't realize where I should go, I can't do anything, basically. Because I, like I said, had many times that I basically did everything I could in my disposal. But that wasn't actually the case. I was just missing something. So some doors, I noticed them, but they were locked and stuff like that. So I had to look stuff up a lot. And sometimes I forgot some stuff were there but locked as well. So I didn't think about returning to them after a point. So that's a little bit of not that fun. So I probably missed some bosses. And I'm saying probably, but I know I missed some bosses, especially the DLCs. And I actually want to return to them, but I don't really know. I saw some of them are really boring bosses, and I saw some of them are fun. So I'll probably give it a go. But I don't know. If they are too complicated to get to, I may not. But at the end of the game, I was really feeling like I had enough. So I just finished the last boss and actually finished the game. I beat, I think, around 35 bosses or something. I had a list, but I was crossing off bosses because I wanted to go to the next boss. Because after a point in the game, of course, you discover new places and see new stuff. But like I said, areas are generally small and don't lead to many places. And generally, you see everything in a place, and then that place is basically off. And when that happens, I didn't really felt like the whole world was connected. Because in Dark Souls 2, it's pretty much like that. With shortcuts and stuff, you actually connect everything together. But in Dark Souls 2, it's, I think, a lot bigger map, if I'm not mistaken. So not everything is that connected in a way. Which is also the thing I mentioned actually. In Dark Souls 1, when I finish an area, I get back to an area I was already in, or I find a new area because they were really well connected. But in Dark Souls 2, when I finish an area, what I see is a dead end generally. So I have to go back via bonfire, which generally kills my exploration enjoyment. So yeah, but that's the thing about me. Anyway, so what I was saying is that after a point, the game really turned into a boss hunt for me. I wanted to go to the next boss, and then to the next boss, and then to the next boss. And when I found my way through wikis, to, where I should go next to unlock a new area, I just closed off the wiki and explored it myself, which is, I think, a good thing, because, like, I just needed that key or that, passage to that new area. I don't care about the best routes of that area or, the best things you can do in that area. I don't need that. I like exploring that myself. So I just used wikis and YouTube videos to my advantage in finding those places. But after doing that for 30 or 40 times, it gets really boring. So I just wanted to finish the game in my last 5 hours or so. But yeah, I think that's really about it. I think some of the concepts were really nice. I think some decisions were not that good for me. But in the end of the day, I think it's a game worth giving a shot. I think Dark Souls 2 is not that bad of a game, and you may like it after playing it for a while. In my first, 3 or so hours, I had fun, but I wasn't that hooked. But after a little more while, I really had a lot of fun. So yeah, that's really about it. I just wanted to talk about this, and I'm really eager to play Dark Souls 3 now. I am finally there. But yeah, we'll see what's happened. Anyway, see ya.